To speak about cinema is to say nothing if you're just trapped in the United States. Because the real spirit of cinema within the art of cinema, yes. Few people put those two words together. That's found in other countries, actually. The best movies are made in other countries. No doubt. I mean, all the money that Hollywood spends, but it goes to producing some good content, and also all the money that's there has gone to create a competition where there's good content within the big pile of just the trash heap of Hollywood. Like, for instance, I'll just give you a quick example before I talk about the foreign films, which are so much better. But I mean, there are a few directors, and that it's not more than a few. There's like movies come out all the time in the U.S. that are great. Comedies are probably the real forte of the art of cinema within the U.S. in my personal point of view. I mean, lots of people love the horror genres and stuff, and I don't. I think that Hollywood is sick. Like, ever since the Gremlins, it's so demented and false and deranged, the vision that's going on there, and then like what they're communicating is so demented and violent and sick. It's a purgatory, or worse. There's lots of that genre of horror and so forth. So there's a loss of art. And what I was about to say, I'm going to finish all my thoughts because I have about 6 thoughts I've just juggled up into the air, and I haven't like finished any one of them. I know what I'm doing. But because the horror genre that's what I was going to talk about, and I'll finish that thought in a minute about the foreign movies and how the best vampire film, in my view, the best one ever made, it came out about 10 years ago or 12 years ago or something, from Iran. Definitely. Iranian cinema is something else, and there are lots of other great countries, Japan, Italy, I mean, lots, Spain, lots of other countries, Brazil, but within cinema. But of course, France is the key. France is the home to cinema. But so the horror genre, they've done it much better in Persia with their vampire film. That one that came out, it was a noir too. It was a black and white film. It was probably one of the best films ever made, even outside of its genre. And yet, let alone standalone, as far, they took the vampire genre and nailed it. And with a modern context, with the movie Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. That was it. And then the rest of Hollywood, I mean, it's dwarfed. Even all their billions they spend on the Freddy Kruegers and the Stephen King, just tasteless crap with no art. I mean, even Stephen King, he has no art, really, in the way he writes. He's artless. He's artless. It's pulp crap that's going to fade. He's not going to be known as the Shakespeare hundreds of years from now of our time. Not at all. He'll be forgotten. Artless. So I guess it goes with that. Like H.P. Lovecraft in my book is artless as well. Artless. He's artless. It's just like, where the hell's his muse, man? H.P. Lovecraft, where the hell is his muse? Just to jump to literature for a minute. Lost, Shades, Lost Fellows. I can't stand reading about stupid shit, like little vapors, little vapors that suddenly materialize out of thin air and stuff like that. Like the literary technique is so crass and so demented, kind of like the Gremlins. Like, so to finish the first thought that I was about to finish at the very beginning, like, well, where can you see in the trash heap of Hollywood? Take, for instance, there's talent all the time, but it's rare. It's rare. It's maybe once every few years, unless there's a great director like Woody Allen. Well, Woody Allen was probably the greatest American director in my book, because he nailed every genre, and there's art in all of his films. And plus, he's a comedian. Most of his films are comedy or verge on that. Match Point had no comedy, but I mean, it was art all the way through, and suspense. And I like the suspense genre within the U.S., within Hollywood. There are good films that come out, like that Knives Out film and things like that. Like, things come out, you can just name things. It's an endless pit. People love films. But to finish the first point that I keep getting sidetracked on and never finish, it's what's his name? Terence, Quintin Tarantino. That's his name. He's got art in his films, definitely. You could see he's a person who, from the very beginning, way back in the 90s, when he was starting out, I don't know, maybe he was starting out in the 80s, but he was pretty young in the 80s. But Tarantino, he was definitely someone just like Woody Allen, who takes much inspiration from the great French directors like Truffaut and the French New Wave. There are about 4 or 5 directors. I don't want to go into all of them now, because there are other countries like Fellini in Italy. Was complete. He had a muse. His muse was very much alive, and he had great humor and wit that climaxed. His humor, which is most of the time over people's audience, it just almost seems like just strange extravagance in his films. It really comes alive when you see his films. The clown. I mean, he nailed the clown genre, the circus genre. He made it an archetype of a film with Fellini's The Clowns. But Tarantino, he just did a movie about 5 or 6 years ago. It was a cowboy flick. I forget what it was called, but it was brilliant. I mean, it wasn't actually brilliant, but it was masterful. That's what I wanted to say. It wasn't brilliant only because it was a same old storyline. That's all. But I mean, no problem with resurrecting an old thing. I mean, that's what, if you think about it, it's almost impossible to make an original film. Well, it's not. I mean, I've seen them. I've seen friends who do it, but to get it past censors and get it up on big screen, it's pretty much impossible. You're going to be having to work within a framework of old films that were successful and old. But I mean, of course, you can play upon that, but it's that play is old, and that's what Tarantino knew. Like, to play what he did in Pulp Fiction, he knew it wasn't new to play within the time frame of a story like that, and to show the different time frames out of sequence a little bit. He knew that. That was something from the French New Wave, and I mean, perhaps Hitchcock was the first, right? Like, Hitchcock was someone that French New Wave was like fanatic about. Chabrol, Truffaut, who's that other great director? I just slipped my mind. But then again, you go to Germany and you have someone like Werner Herzog, like the most artistic director of Europe. I mean, he's just so iconic. There's art and there's a muse to everything he does, and yet it's so iconic from the very get-go. I mean, his greatest film is one of his oldest, but that doesn't mean he didn't go on to do great things. It's just his other films just borderline the bizarre and the strange. That's all. They're just bizarre, some of them, but they're really good. Like, I finally saw the last one. The first one I was going to mention is the Aguirre, The Wrath of God. One of his earliest films is the best film ever made. I mean, hands down, that's the best film ever made. I mean, or maybe he tied with one or two of Akira Kurosawa's films from Japan, because there was another master director who had a muse and who really brought that muse alive, and who respected the tradition, deeply respected the tradition, and was interested in exploring the narratives in new forms and exploring the old narratives, the Shakespearean narratives, and all of that. I mean, we've got to be open and inspired by all of these other things. It's like Hollywood claims to be too closed off. Like all of those writers, Lovecraft and Stephen King, their persona is one that it sort of claims to be too closed off. And yet, like, if you look into it, like, even in special effects, the U.S. Hollywood, the overemphasis on special effects, that's there's way too much importance. And that's why I bring up this film. The whole purpose of this talk is to talk about that great Iranian film, that masterpiece of black and white cinema that was put out in like 2010 or it's something thereabout. Now, don't quote me exactly. It's like, I can't exactly remember, but it was sometime a long time ago, about a decade ago. And I mean, there are good. I'm not saying all of the vampire films are bad in the U.S. It's a genre too. I mean, the French New Wave, you see that cast in different lights, like Celine and Julie go boating. You see a sort of a vampire zombie theme within that's sort of resurrected in a new light. So I mean, French New Wave, that's really where all the inspiration of cinema is. And any directors in Hollywood, I mean, if you're not there and you haven't been lit with the fire of inspiration to see as many of those films as you can, because there are so many great, masterful films from the 60s and 70s France, then they're shut out, and so. And then, all that's left is like sci-fi and special effects. But the narrative and the dialogue takes a toll. And that's why, like, the dialogue within Star Wars from the very beginning, from the first one that came out in 80 something, from the very first one, I could see when I was just 5 years old. I went and saw that in a movie theater, and it was one of the first films that was just completely uninteresting, because it was not believable, and that the acting betrayed that. No matter what they say, and they try to feign the emotions, it's like there was something lacking in the heart of that storyline. It was uprooted. That's it. It was uprooted from its true roots and the true inspiration of cinema's roots. And so it fails. There's even if they try to force a Shakespearean dialogue into it later on, or even in the beginning, it's Shakespearean sort of plot. It's hanging over the abyss. It's uprooted. A lot of these things. So cinema is bad, but that Iranian film, And to make a black and white film at that time and have it be just as better than probably even color would have been. And it was such a low budget film too as well, and yet it was a masterpiece, absolute masterpiece. I mean, it wasn't that low budget, but I mean, it was a masterpiece of tension. And of course, you don't see the gore as well. The gore is implied. That's the best, right? Like, act like it's a stage. Imply the gore. Don't actually make me look at it. All right, please don't make me look at the gore with special effects. I'm fatigued by that kind of need for visual delusion, right? It's like, and that's the whole thing, the French New Wave cinema. It's about storytelling. It's not about simulacra, right? Hollywood, it's so lost now, and especially the big corporate ones. The bigger the corporate thing, the more lost they are. No wonder. But I mean, so he left. Woody Allen left. He lives in France. I'm sure he just couldn't. In the end, it's like artists like me. We just, in the end, we can't stand the U.S. It's so absolutely shallow, like unfailingly, utterly shallow all the time. So he leaves, goes someplace where people have art and class and dignity and human heart and compassion and fascination for the arts still, and an understanding and compassion for the sacrifice that artists are imperiled with. It's like, U.S., it just seems it's so utterly lost on the bottom line of money. That's just lost in, when we have Stephen King novels with this graphic violence and gore, then, we make more money. But what we're giving to posterity through that is a bankrupt sort of dialogue. That's what's happening. We need to resurrect the true dialogue within, and like I was saying, I pointed out a few directors already. A lot of them did that. So to finish my talk on this great Iranian film called Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, it was a reformatting it was just a new version, a modern version. It was sort of a modern vampire, and it was a new theme because the girl ended up being I don't want to break it for you, but it doesn't really matter because no one's going to see it. No one's listening to me anyways. The point is the dialogue, how the girl was the vampire in the end, but also so was the drug dealer. It was a lot to do with that drug dealer. You could see from the very beginning, but then he was living in a society that you could see he was embedded within a society of corruption where the oil industry was sort of ruling the town under a sort of kind of a martial law, right? That's what was looming. So it was a very ominous, witty statement and communication. That's what it was. And it was a work of genius. It was a film of genius, and because of the humor as well. There was so much poignant humor. Nothing that you would really, like, Americans could laugh at in a movie theater, because Americans mostly. I've been going to movies a long time. I sit in movie theaters. Usually, I laugh alone. Usually I catch jokes and I laugh, like, usually before someone else or before other people will laugh. It's usually by a few seconds. But there are lots of jokes I'll laugh at, people no one else will laugh at, and then there's these cues and everyone will laugh, and I'll be thinking about it because it's something that's not funny, and it's strange how audiences are being swept along with that without even realizing the kind of gimmicks that are being used to cue their expectations. And it's artless in the end. It's art. That's art, but it's a sort of hypnotic art that's artless and that's rootless in the end, without any, that's what it is. It's rootless, without any true feeling for the history. In my book, that's what I would say, without any true feeling for the true history of the cinema and the storytelling that we need. So that's it for today.